What if I told you that the religious labels that humanity has, thought and debated and literally died over for centuries are actually viewed by God as nothing more than corporate HR departments?
Right, like the ultimate cosmic bureaucracy.
Exactly. I mean, we spend our entire lives putting ourselves into these little boxes, defining ourselves by the specific denomination we belong to, or, the cultural faction we represent.
And we cling to those labels because, well, they make a chaotic world feel organized. It's a human coping mechanism, really.
Yeah.
We are essentially building these massive filing cabinets for human identity and meticulously sorting everyone into the quote-unquote correct folder.
Yeah, but today we are opening that filing cabinet to look in a truly fascinating stack of source material. We've got a highly analytical collection of personal notes from an author who is radically rethinking their relationship with the Quran, modern technology, and the true nature of divine mercy.
It's a really deep text.
It is. And our mission for this deep dive is to strip away all those superficial layers of religious identity alongside you, the listener, and explore what this source author believes it actually means to seek divine help in a complex, algorithm-driven world.
What's fascinating here is the author's radical redefinition of human divisions right out of the gate. They start by looking at a specific verse in the Quran, Surah Ash-Shura, chapter 42, verse 8. And just to clarify, a surah is simply a chapter within the Quranic text.
Right.
So this particular text essentially says that if God had willed it, he could have made all of humanity one uniform community.
Meaning God possessed the power to make sure everyone spoke the exact same language, wore the exact same clothes, and operated under one monolithic culture, like complete unbroken uniformity.
Precisely. But the author notes a really crucial detail here. God intentionally didn't do that. Diversity exists by cosmic design.
Wow.
Okay. Yeah, and because God deliberately chose not to make us one uniform worldly group, the author concludes that our worldly groups, our sects, our highly guarded cultural factions, they don't actually matter on a cosmic scale.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because this is a massive paradigm shift. It's like getting completely obsessed with the color of your team's jersey and forgetting you're actually supposed to be playing a sport.
That is a great way to put it.
The jersey doesn't make you an athlete, it just tells the audience where to look. But wait, I have to push back here a little. I mean, humans are biologically wired to need tribes to survive. Isn't community supposed to be absolutely central to any belief system?
It's a fair point.
How can the source author just dismiss thousands of years of community building as just corporate structuring?
I see the friction there. But the author isn't suggesting we dissolve communities or live in total isolation. What they're warning against is the very human tendency to mistake a bureaucratic label for divine salvation.
Ah, I see.
The analogy they use is a modern corporation. You have finance, you have IT, you have human resources. Why do those departments exist? For human convenience. They help the company function on a day-to-day basis.
So joining a specific religious sect is basically like joining the IT department.
Yes. Exactly. And the danger is thinking, well, I am wearing the IT department badge, therefore I am inherently a good employee. The label of the group is just an earthly organizing principle. It doesn't grant you access to what the author argues is the only categorization that actually matters to God.
Which is what?
According to the text, God only sees two groups. Group one is those admitted into his mercy. Group two is wrongdoers who have no helpers. It's entirely binary.
Wow. Which fundamentally changes the objective of faith, right? Because if being part of the quote-unquote right earthly department doesn't matter, everything hinges on getting into that first group.
Right.
It all hinges on this concept of mercy. But the source material redefines mercy in a way that just shatters the usual assumptions. Most people, when they think of divine mercy, imagine a giant protective bubble, like a magical force field that just keeps bad things from ever happening to you.
We equate mercy with a problem-free existence. But the author points out a glaring logical flaw in that theology. I mean, if you had absolutely no problems, you wouldn't need any help at all. You would be entirely self-sufficient.
Right.
According to the text, mercy doesn't mean the storm never comes. Mercy means God actively helps you handle the storm when it inevitably hits.
And on the flip side, the wrongdoers, that second group, they aren't necessarily struck by lightning or actively punished in the moment. The text says they simply have no helpers.
The isolation itself is the consequence. They're left entirely on their own to handle the catastrophic messes they cause. The author brings in a story from the Quran to illustrate this dynamic, specifically from the chapter called The Cave, or Al-Kahf.
Oh, I've heard of this one.
Yeah, it revolves around two friends. One of them is incredibly wealthy, constantly boasting about his worldly assets, his lush gardens, and his massive success. He basically believes he is entirely self-made and self-sufficient.
He believes his wealth is his ultimate helper.
Exactly. And his friend, who has far less in terms of material wealth, warns him not to associate partners with God. This second friend realizes something profound. His own survival and whatever success he has is purely a manifestation of God's mercy. It's not about his own brilliance or his societal status. He recognizes that this active daily mercy is the one thing he absolutely cannot afford to lose.
The source author takes this a step further, actually, and argues that all the foundational practices of faith, like prayer, performing good deeds, or giving zakat, which is the obligatory giving to charity, these aren't the ultimate end goals of a believer.
No, they aren't.
They're essentially the application process. They are how you submit your resume to get recruited into this mercy group.
Right, the rituals are the vehicle, not the destination.
Think about the psychological shift here. If you view mercy not as an impenetrable shield, but as active assistance during a storm, the fear of taking a risk just completely evaporates.
It's totally liberating.
You aren't expecting a problem-free life anymore. You don't have to be afraid of stepping into the unknown, because if you are in that first group, clarity and help will arrive while you are in the struggle.
It shifts the entire focus of existence from desperately trying to avoid adversity to seeking divine companionship through the adversity.
If this active, dynamic type of mercy is the ultimate prize, the natural question becomes, how do we actually get recruited? Like, how do we ensure our application is accepted?
Well, the author calls this the million-dollar question and decides to conduct what they call PhD-level research on what God actually wants from humanity. And their methodology is strikingly simple, yet deeply revealing.
Yeah, I love this part.
They basically bypass all the centuries of scholarly debate and literally just do a keyword search through the text of the Quran for the phrase, God loves.
Here's where it gets really interesting. It's such a modern, analytical approach. And the results of that search are incredibly telling. When you look at what the text explicitly states God loves, it is entirely focused on internal character traits.
Yeah.
God loves those who do good, those who constantly turn to him, those who keep their pledges. God loves those who put their trust in him, the patient, the just, and those who purify themselves.
Now, consider what is conspicuously missing from that list.
I mean, there is zero mention of physical appearance or fashion.
Nothing.
There is nothing about speaking Arabic flawlessly. There is nothing about the physical act of memorizing the Quran itself or performing extra late-night voluntary prayers, what the text calls tahajjud.
The author emphasizes this absence, pointing out a massive gap between what human beings spend their time debating and obsessing over and what the text actually says God values. They even admit that given this massive gap between our societal religious priorities and the text priorities, they honestly don't know where humanity will end up on the Day of Judgment.
I hear that, but I have to play devil's advocate for a second.
Go for it.
Practically speaking, how do you measure an internal trait like patience or trust without looking at the outward action? Isn't the physical action the proof of the internal trait? If someone is memorizing a sacred text or consistently waking up for tahajjud, aren't those outward rituals the exact mechanism by which people demonstrate they are turning to God?
That is the core tension of religious practice right there.
Yeah.
And it's central to the author's critique. It's not that outward actions are inherently bad or useless.
Okay.
The structural failure happens when the outward actions become the goal themselves, entirely divorced from the internal change they were supposed to create. If you are memorizing a holy text but you operate your business with arrogance and injustice, you've fundamentally failed the equation.
Wow.
To go back to the earlier analogy, you are wearing the IT department badge proudly on your chest, but you have absolutely no idea how to turn on a computer.
The badge becomes a hollow substitute for this skill. But if these outward labels are so hollow, why do we cling to them so desperately? I mean, if the text so clearly focuses on internal character-driven traits, why is modern society so obsessed with physical, easily identifiable markers of faith?
Well, according to the author, a massive portion of the blame falls directly on modern technology.
Yeah, the author talks extensively about how the label Muslim, and frankly, this applies to any religious or cultural identity today, has essentially been transformed into a modern brand.
Think about it. Consider how a search engine, a YouTube algorithm, or a generative AI model actually functions. An algorithm is essentially a matching engine. It cannot process abstract, deeply internal qualities.
Right.
A Google search cannot filter a video for those who keep their pledges or the patient. It simply doesn't compute.
It needs keywords.
Exactly. Technology requires rigid labels, binary tags, and hyper-specific visual categories to filter information and serve you a recommendation. It can only quantify click-through rates on thumbnail images featuring specific religious clothing or buzzwords.
So, to get any visibility in a digital world, a spiritual person is forced to adopt the label. The algorithm flattens their complex humanity into a monetizable tag. The author notes that simply because of how YouTube works, they are constantly bombarded with recommendations for Muslim-labeled videos.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the irony here is staggering. We started this deep dive by noting that God intentionally did not make humanity one uniform group. The text explicitly states diversity was the goal. But our tech algorithms are doing the exact opposite.
That is so true.
They are aggressively dividing humanity into hyper-specific, homogeneous echo chambers based entirely on superficial, easily searchable labels.
And there is real tangible money on the line. The author points out that there is a massive financial incentive to adopt and perform these labels. Content creators can build entire empires by tailoring their videos specifically to an algorithmic religious brand.
Oh, absolutely.
But as the source notes, there's absolutely nothing officially religious about this digital branding. It is pure commerce wrapped in a theological aesthetic.
And this technological need for categorization isn't just staying online. It is bleeding into reality, creating tangible polarization. We are actively performing our identities for the algorithm, rather than cultivating the internal, quiet traits the text actually asks for.
But if these digital labels are just a modern invention, it makes you wonder why we instinctively treat them like shields. What do we actually think this label is going to protect us from when a real-world crisis hits?
That brings us to what the author considers the absurdity of seeking protection in anything other than the divine itself. We have a profound habit of misplacing our trust.
The author uses the example of citizenship, which I found totally fascinating. You might walk through the world feeling incredibly protected because you hold a passport from a wealthy, powerful country.
Right.
But the absolute second you step across a hostile border or the geopolitical winds shift, that protection vanishes into thin air. The label of citizen is incredibly fragile.
It is. And we apply that exact same flawed logic to physical religious items. The author brings up a wonderfully humorous memory of childhood fables, the trope of using a physical Bible to ward off Dracula.
I loved that part. It really highlights how deeply superstitious we can be, even within organized religion. The author questions the sheer logic of it all. They ask if you actually encountered a devil, do you just hold up a physical copy of the Quran?
Right. Does the devil physically recoil from the paper and ink?
Exactly. And what if you don't have the physical book? Can you just show the devil a Quran app on your iPhone? Does the LED screen emit a holy light?
And taking that a step further, the author asks, do devils even understand Arabic? Where would they have learned it? We end up treating the book or the app like a magical talisman.
Think about where you find your own safety net. Is it in the label you wear? Is it the app on your phone, the necklace you wear, the specific building you visit on a Sunday or a Friday? Or is it what those things are actually pointing to? Because the author's conclusion here is blunt.
Very blunt.
The Quran is an instruction manual. It is a warning. God never says to seek protection with the book itself, but to use the book to learn how to seek protection in God.
This blind reliance on labels, on algorithmic brands, on physical objects as magical shields, it all reveals a much deeper systemic flaw in how human beings process information and reality. We desperately want a shortcut. We want a rule we can follow so we don't have to do the hard work of thinking.
Which leads us to what is easily the most mind-bending part of these notes. The author's ultimate mathematical analogy. It requires a bit of visualization, but it perfectly encapsulates this entire problem.
The author loves math, and they share a problem they were teaching to their child. It's a simple equation, 6 minus 2 times 3.
Okay, let me visualize this. 6 minus 2 times 3.
Depending on how you approach that string of numbers, you get two completely different mathematically sound answers. If you just read it sequentially, left to right, 6 minus 2 is 4, and then you multiply that 4 by 3, which gives you 12.
But wait, if I apply the standard math rules I learned in school, you always do multiplication first. So 2 times 3 is 6. Then you take the original 6 minus that 6, and the answer is 0.
Exactly. The equation itself is completely ambiguous. So as a society, to avoid total chaos in engineering and finance, we invented a rule. In many educational systems, it's called body mass brackets, orders, division, multiplication, addition, subtraction. It's the order of operations.
So under the societal rule of body mass, you must multiply before you subtract. The answer is standardized. Everyone in the classroom agrees the answer is 0.
But here's the critical philosophical insight. Body mass is an invention. It is a societal convenience designed entirely to remove ambiguity so everyone is on the same page. And the author points out that children, once they learn body mass, experience intense cognitive dissonance if you suggest there might be another way to solve the problem. To the child, the rule is the absolute truth.
And the author argues that religion operates identically to body mass.
Yes. Over centuries, we established complex rituals, symbols, and strict theological rules to remove the terrifying ambiguity of faith. It's a worldly convenience. It ensures everyone in the group produces the same answer and behaves the same way. But producing the same answer doesn't necessarily mean you've figured out the actual truth of the universe.
Because to find the truth, you have to know what the numbers actually represent in the real world.
Right.
The author uses mangoes as a real-world anchor for the math, and we need to slow down here because this is where the whole thing clicks. Let's apply the math to reality.
Okay, let's say the number 6 represents mangoes on a table. If you have 6 mangoes, and you are told to put 2 mangoes each into the 3 different bags, you have 0 mangoes left on the table. In this specific context, the Bodhi-Ma rule of getting to 0 perfectly matches reality.
What if the real-world situation is different? What if you have 6 mangoes on the table, you get hungry and eat 2 of them, and then you want to put the remaining mangoes equally into 3 bags?
Let's see.
Let me try to apply Bodhi-Ma to that. If I blindly follow the rule, I multiply 2 by 3 and get 6, then 6 minus 6 is 0. But I literally just ate 2 mangoes. I have 4 mangoes left in my hands. I need to divide 4 mangoes into 3 bags. The answer isn't 0. The answer is 1 1/3 mangoes per bag. The Bodhi-Ma rule fails entirely because it ignored the context of the fruit.
The math fails because you prioritize the rule over the reality. We read religious texts as simply 6 minus 2 times 3. We apply our rigid, societal Bodhi-Ma rules to it, our memorization, our labels, our tribal divisions. But we rarely pause to ask what God actually meant by the equation. We don't know if the divine intention was 6 minus 2 then multiplied by 3, or 6 minus the product of 2 times 3, because we are too busy enforcing the order of operations.
So what does this all mean?
Well, we are so incredibly focused on running the algorithm. We are obsessed with perfectly executing the rituals, wearing the algorithmically approved labels, and following the societal rules of our specific corporate department of faith. But in doing all of that, we have completely forgotten to ask what the original question was. To truly understand the equation, you have to try to understand the nature of God first before you blindly apply a societal rulebook to your life.
It's a profound reevaluation of how we interact with the text and the world around us. We've spent centuries arguing over the order of operations, fighting wars over who has the correct mathematical rule, while completely losing sight of the mangoes.
It really makes you step back.
It does. We've gone from looking at our religious and cultural groups as meaningless corporate departments to redefining divine mercy not as a problem-free life, but as active, vital help during our struggles. We've seen how our modern obsession with algorithmic brand religion actually divides us, pushing us away from the internal traits that matter. And we've realized how we mistakenly treat sacred texts like magical Dracula repellents instead of actual instructions for living.
And it all culminates in this realization that blind adherence to the rules of faith might mean we are solving the entirely wrong equation. It forces you to look at your own life and ask a very uncomfortable question.
Which is?
If the universe is a complex math problem, and God is asking you how to divide the mangoes of your time, your financial resources, and your empathy, are you actually looking at the mangoes in front of you? Or are you just blindly multiplying the numbers because a centuries-old rule book told you to, completely ignoring the starving person right in front of you who desperately needed the fruit?
Wow, that is going to sit with me for a long time. Are we obsessing over the empty labels on our filing cabinets, or are we looking at the actual fruit in our hands? Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Keep questioning the labels you wear, keep looking for the real meaning behind the rules, and we will catch you next time.